So the Yanks are covered, though, in the rotation, right? Because that's how they were built. Garrett Cole, Fried, they brought in Rodon, whether we like him or not, whatever, it doesn't matter for the conversation. He's still a high-paid pitcher. The Yankees have invested the majority of their resources in that rotation. Whereas the Mets, I don't want to say went cheap in the rotation, but you know what I mean? Their big investments have been in the lineup now, bringing in Juan Soto, bringing back Pete. And yeah, bringing back Manaea was a nice move, but the Mets rotation is one, more of depth than it is quality atop the rotation. The Yankees have the opposite. I think I prefer. Now, I always used to go the Yankees way, meaning I give me Cole, give me Fried, let's go to war, figure it out. You got the big slugger with Judge. You don't need a loaded lineup. But I think the way the Mets are doing it in today's game, to me, is more beneficial long term.
You know, it's interesting. I think both teams are good. I think both teams have a chance to be really good. I think both teams are flawed. That could maybe unravel some things if it doesn't go the way we want from a health perspective. And I also think that neither team really went all in. A little less than offseason for both the Yankees and the Mets. I mean, you look at this, the Yankees are hoping that a 37-year-old first baseman regenerates in Goldschmidt. They don't have a third baseman right now. You touched on,
outfield depth.
That's where I was going. Left field and certainly depth. I don't like the Yankees bench. But, when we were growing up, I think a lot of, even when we were, not when we were kids, but beyond that, like the Yankees would always have like a Ruben Sierra coming off the bench or a Chili Davis. Like, I just think that those days are done around baseball because the aging, slow hitter has pretty much been phased out of the game. It's been a little bit more athletically, teams more athletically inclined, so to speak, more dynamic players. So the Yankees are obviously rolling the dice on a couple of positions here. And, I don't love, although I understand it, I don't love the Mets going with a six-man rotation.
Right.
Again, but I get it. But I like it even less when one guy who I didn't even really believe in, neither did you, and Frankie Montas, he's out until at least, I know they say May, at least May. I would think so. At least May. So we'll say at least May. And they're still going to do this this six-man experiment here with some arms that we don't know a whole lot about. So that's why I started the statement with, I think both teams are good. I think both teams could be very good, but both teams stop short of going all in this offseason.
But which way would you prefer to build a team? Because I think you touched on something interesting there. If this were 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, I would be saying, give me Cole, give me Fried, give me Aaron Judge. I'm okay with that. Give me John Carl Stanton. But the way the sport has evolved, I don't think it's a smart investment in putting a lot of your resources in the starting rotation and pitchers, which we know have been so fragile, and not having depth or versatility in that lineup. I mean, you mentioned it with Stanton. He's been clogging up a spot for years. They're relying on him even more this year, relying on him without Juan Soto to be an impact bat. He's already hurt to start the year. You know he's always going to get hurt anyway. So, like, the DH spot, the lack of depth, the resources used in the starting rotation, those are all to me. Now, again, I still think the Yankees are going to be a good team and go to the World Series, but I just don't like the philosophy in building a team that way in today's game.
I don't think they want to build it that way, quite frankly, but I think that some of these contracts, DJ's got a couple of years to go, the Stanton stuff lingers. That's why all these mistakes I should say all the mistakes, I mean, they've been a very good franchise, but some of the mistakes that Cashman's made in the last couple of years, it's still right in front of us here. I'm going to answer it directly. Right. So which one do I prefer? I don't think either is perfect, to be very clear, but
I'm not talking about Mets versus Yankees.
No, we're talking about Mets and Yankees. Yeah, very, very clear distinction. I'm happy you say that.
Philosophy of how you build a team.
Yeah, it's not like, the Yankees are going to win 93, and the Mets are going to win 92 or 94. No, it's not about that. It's about pushing this thing forward. What's the more prudent approach? I'm going to answer it this way with a question, but you'll know where I stand when I ask the question. What do you think is easier to address midseason? Finding, let's say in the case of the Yankees, a third baseman who very well might bat 6th or 7th or 8th, or a guy at the top of the rotation that you're going to give the baseball to in October, either as an ace or a 2 or 3. I think it's a lot easier to solve the Yankees' issues. And listen, more issues may present themselves deeper in the season. If Dominguez isn't the real deal, more injuries, whatever. But we're just addressing it today. I actually prefer the Yankees way, but I know that it's not perfect. But I do prefer it slightly more than the Mets. I don't love the Mets staff.
Even that, by the way, has changed. Where in season you used to think, okay, well, there's going to be a top pitcher who's going to hit hit free agency, he'll be available. It's going to be a couple of top offensive players. Like, I think it used to be more offensive players. I'm not so sure anymore. We've seen the Mets for years, dating back to like Billy Epler with Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelbach. They needed a bat. There wasn't a good option out there. Like, there wasn't a bat. So I think it depends now, where the contracts lined up. Like, look, maybe Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to be the big bat that's on the market. Is there an arm? I don't know. Maybe we could find that out. Who are going to be the potential arms, free agent arms out there? I just think the smarter investment. Here's the way I would say it. The difference between, and if I were going to invest in a starting pitcher this offseason, it would have been Max Fried. Mm-hmm. He would have been the guy I would have invested big in. But what's the difference between Max Fried and Sean Manaea?
I think Max Fried's stuff is better, but I'm not saying that there's not some infinite difference. Okay, but Manaea is good and Max Fried's really good.
And then look at the value in what you're paying one versus the other. And I'm not trying to, again, like, it's not trying to say, well, the Yankees are getting wrong. I'm just saying, like, when you actually look at the value, I think there's more value in the way the Mets are doing it. Yeah, Montas, same thing, and obviously it didn't work out, and we didn't like that one to begin with, but they're thinking, hey, for 2 years, $34 million with Frankie Montas, there's the potential this guy could be a solid 4 for us and pitch to a 4 ERA versus Carlos Rodon, who's essentially doing the same thing for $160 million. I'm just pitting the two together for the sake of the conversation. So now look, you could say the same thing. All right, well, and that's why I think Juan Soto's a smart investment, because the drop off from his replacement is significant. Right? Yeah. But the drop off from, and maybe that's why your argument for not getting Bregman. Okay, well, are you going to pay 160, whatever it is, $40 million a year for Bregman versus the drop off? Now, in the Yankees' case, there's a significant drop off there because it's DJ LeMahieu. They don't have a good third base option. But maybe the next guy could have been a little better for a better value. I don't think the Yankees have a lot of value contracts on their hands. Their values in Dominguez, Volpe, Wells, Heel, Weaver.
Those are a lot of names you've thrown out there that have pretty prominent roles on the team, though. So that's a good thing.
But there are a lot of them,
they got to deliver.
Well, a lot of them are unproven. That's
true, and that's what it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day driving. Now, don't get me wrong. Last year at this time, I was so pumped to watch the Soto and Judge show. Of course, every Yankee fan was, right? And not that I loved it back then as well, going into the season with the Birdies and the Tinos and the Jeters and the Moes and the Pettits and the guys that you knew were going to be there. That was tremendous as well. I'm really excited about this Yankee team. Eyes are wide open that there are things that I don't love and things that need to come to fruition for the Yankees to be better than they were a year ago, at least to take another step. And there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. But I'm always intrigued when there's new pieces and there's new parts, provided there's enough of the other stuff that is above average and that there is with the pitching and with Aaron Judge to make it interesting. Sal, I look at it. I'm going to simplify it a little bit more. To me, the Yankees, again, not Yankees versus Mets, Yankees and Mets today, I believe the Yankees have more margin for error when they start the season, meaning this. If Volpe scuffles and hits 220, or Wells is hitting 190 through the first 3 weeks, or Dominguez is lost in left field, the Yankees, which I don't anticipate all three, if all three happen, then we got problems. But, one of them very well might. It's baseball. It's hard. But if that happens, you got the bullpen, and you have a starting staff that's going to give you a chance to win every day. Whereas with the Mets, if they pitch around Soto and Lindor gets off to a cold start, I don't know if he will, but if he does, if Vientos takes a slight step back, year 2, get a book on him around the rest of the league.
It's a lot of ifs, though.
But it's also a lot of ifs at the Yankees. I presented there as well. I got you. Then I think when you look at the Mets pitching, I won't say I don't believe. That's a little strong. I don't love their ability to keep their team afloat if the offense is stagnant. I love the Yankees' pitching ability to do that.
I would normally agree, but then we saw it last year, and I just think the way the sport has evolved, you can find pitchers who can maybe keep you in the game for 4 or 5 innings. Look, I think it's a fun conversation to have. And by the way, I don't like the Mets rotation because I certainly don't like a 6-man rotation. I'm open to the idea, but they're doing it to placate Kodai Senga, which to me doesn't make any sense. Think about it. The Mets are using 6 starters, and they don't really have the quality of starters. So, their strength was depth. They had 8 guys. Okay, well, these guys are professional arms. You're not digging into the minors to have a guy get tattooed when he comes up and take a spot. You got professional arms that can give you a quality start. 4 or 5 innings, keep the team in the game.
Yeah, give you puncher's chance. Yeah, I got you.
Which I like. But now when you lose one of those 8 or whatever it is, and one of the ones who you thought was going to be good because they brought him in for a 2-year, $34 million deal in Montas, and you're going with 6 as opposed to 5, all of a sudden that depth is now it's not depth. Now you're using them
Yes.
on a regular basis. So I think that there are flaws in that as well. I just think it's the better value to where you're building a team. Meanwhile, the Mets have the highest payroll in the sport.
You talk about value, I know.
But it's because of the contracts that were there before. I mean, I think that that'll be shed a little bit as the years go on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan just conceptually, really applying to anything in life. If something is average, or you want to look at the back of the Mets rotation, maybe a tick below average going in, why am I going to stretch that even thinner and make that more of a focal point? You think that you would want to work around maybe some deficiencies, but the silver lining is this, and I don't love a six-man. I know why they're doing it for Senga. You're absolutely right. But if Senga, instead of making 32 starts, makes 24, 25, and he gets the ball in October, and he's in Atlanta or Philly or L.A. or at Citi Field, and that ghost ball is just diving, and he's got 9 whiffs, and he's got 2 hits, and he's got 1 walk, and the Mets are up 5-1, you're going to be okay with that 6-man rotation, which might be average at some point this season.
BT and Sal on the Fan. Our friends at Town Fair Tire remind you that at Town Fair Tire, you always get the guaranteed lowest price on name brand tires from Connecticut to Maine. Nobody beats Town Fair Tire. Nobody. Greg is in Westchester. What's up, Greg?
Hey, I just wanted to say, a big Met fan here. Where Stearns really earned his keep last year was the fact of how many guys were on that opening day roster and how many guys they cut ties with when they weren't being successful. He had guys come up on that playoff roster. You probably have 10 to 12 guys who weren't even on the opening day roster, and that doesn't even include guys like Dedniel Nunez, who wasn't even in Major League camp last year. He started out in minor league. No one knew who he was. He's able to find the right fits for the organization at the right time, and I just think that's the strength of Stearns that I haven't seen Cashman even come close to.
Well, Greg, what's interesting? It is definitely a strength, certainly working off his first-year model. Thanks for the call, buddy. We appreciate it. You think about some of the things, and I'm just going to do a Cashman-Stearns thing for a moment here, both. So Cashman's greatest strength, his absolute strength, is somehow every year finding an incredibly viable bullpen. Every single year. Now, It helps when you got Mo for a couple of years. It helps when you have Chapman for a couple of years. I got that. But he's always able to uncover some gems, and that's his absolute strength. The very well might be the absolute strength of David Stearns, where he has this ability to look at a starting pitcher and, squeeze some blood out of the rock and get manageable deals and not commit long-term and then eventually discard them and kind of keep recycling and repurposing those. But I don't think that he wants to do that forever. I think he's on a treadmill to get some of these Sproats and some of these other young flamethrowers up to the majors.
And then
you accent the rotation with those guys.
Correct. And that's the way, though, to build the rotation. The best way, draft, develop
always
the young pitching.
Yep.
That's the way you get. That's what he did in Milwaukee. That's what he's got to do with the Mets eventually, but that takes time. Mets have their pitching lab, all that. This way you're not paying a ridiculous amount of money for a guy who's already given his best years to another organization.
I agree.
You may have to pay eventually to keep that guy here, but maybe you get a good bargain if you lock him up, buy out some of his arbitration years, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. But that's the way, and the more that I think about it, the more I love that way of building a team, especially in today's day and age where pitchers just don't go deep anymore, and starting pitchers always getting hurt, and they cost a ton of money. Eric is in Clifton, New Jersey. What's up, Eric?
Hey, good morning, guys. Hey, fascinating conversation. I think you take the overall thesis from what you're saying, Sal, the last piece of what you were saying, BT. The Dodgers used 40 starting pitchers last year. The MLB average is 12. 42 is the all-time record set by Seattle in 19. BT, you and I had spoken about this when you were with Teak. I think a lot of these roads lead back to the pitch clock. You're forcing these pitchers to just keep gunning and gunning and gunning. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's why they're burning through them. And you see, the older pitchers now, to your point, we had to get rid of 2 older pitchers. Thank God we got something in return. And the second main point I would say is that this game has gravitated way more towards the bats. I mean, dude, Sal, you and I have said, we had to go get Soto because if you're going to get past the Dodgers, there's 7, 8, and 9 hitters. They could do 1, 2, 3 hitters on 80% of the teams in Major League Baseball. Those guys don't swing at bad pitches. I think there was one game in the playoff series against us, Sal. I think they said that they swung 4 pitches that were out of the strike zone. I'm not sure I've ever heard of something like that. I don't know if Silicon Valley's implanting chips in these guys' eye sockets or what, but they don't have bad bats.
Here's the thing, and thank you for the call, Eric. Good stuff right there. Just to give you some perspective, BT, on my change in thought process here with the way the sport has evolved. If you asked 10 years ago, and I remember saying this on the air. I wasn't at the Fan at the time. I was in the minor leagues at WOR when they had the Mets. And I remember working my way up to the
Is that
big.
double or triple? Is that high? Is that high A? Where are we at? Double A? Triple A?
As far as sports talk goes.
Sport double A. Double A.
Whatever
2A.
it was. It was good for me working on my game. And here I am. But anyway, I remember saying on the air, I meant this, I would not have traded Matt Harvey for Mike Trout. This is 2015, because that's how much I value. Now, obviously, I knew what Trout was then. It had nothing to do with the injuries or projecting any of that. It was that I valued that dominant ace more than I valued anything else in the sport. And a part of me still does believe in having, like, once the Yankees get to the postseason, the idea of Cole, Fried, 1-2 punch.
And then heel.
That's very, very appealing to me.
Yep.
But I do think the game has changed to where the ace isn't what we thought it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And while that could be a great advantage to the Yanks, to Eric's point, like, look at the Dodgers, great team last year. They didn't beat the Yankees with their starting pitching. I mean, the pitching was fine. They beat them with the bats. That's the way that you do it.
Yeah, but if you have enough of the bats, and I think the Yankees do, then the overabundance of pitching, it puts you over the top.
See, that's where we disagree in that I think there were a bat short, and that's with counting on Giancarlo Stanton. Now, that could change if Dominguez and Volpe and Wells do what we expect them to do. But going in right now, I do think their lineup looks a little thin.
Well, yes, I'm not going to push back on that. Yeah. It's definitely thin. Every time this comes up, I think if you're a Yankee fan, to not acknowledge it's a little thin, I think is a little foolish or a little naive. Hell, we don't even know who's going to bat first. I mean, so you can't even get to the rest of, we know who we think we should do. Well, yeah. It's either Dominguez. We know Dominguez, Boone certainly leading that way. Yeah. I can make the case for Volpe in year 3, but obviously you look at some of the minor league numbers, Dominguez profile is a bit better in terms of an on-base guy. There's a lot of baseball reasons to put Dominguez over Volpe, and plus if Volpe's batting first and you want him to steal 35 bases, you want him running wild in front of Aaron Judge, there's a thought there as well that it might affect Judge. I get all the baseball stuff, but I still think, Sal, when you've got an all-time, not even just an all-time home run hitter, like an all-time great hitter, anchor in the lineup, and all right, even if you get the B version of Bellinger, now if you get the C version, that changes things, but if you get the B version of Bellinger, I mean, it's not Soto and Judge. That's never going to be the case because Bellinger can't shine Soto's shoes.
Right.
But that is pretty formidable. And then you mix in Jazz stealing 35, 40 bases, popping 18 to 20 things he's already done. Not things that we're hoping he does and that he overachieves. Like he's already put that out there. That's the kind of player he is. So I do think that they have enough. So I'm not saying to be the Dodgers offense, but you telling me we're not going to sit there, 3 out of every 5-6 games, Yankees don't put up 6-7 runs?
Yeah,
the Yankees going to crush the ball.
Hard to believe, and plus they generally do that anyway, especially in that ballpark. I know offense has been an issue for them, a couple of seasons in a row. Last year it was outside.
Certainly when Judge got hurt a couple years ago. That's why they didn't make the playoffs.
I mean, that's the other thing. Thin there. God, if anything ever happens to him, they'd be totally screwed. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. 888-808-1019. I also want to ask you on that, who is the biggest X factor in that Yankee lineup? We could do the Yankee lineup. We could also do the X factor for the Mets rotation, something like that. But I want to get your thoughts on the biggest X factor with the Yankees lineup. BT and Sal on the Fan.